Kyle and Zach, I want to thank you so much. We are a couple of minutes over, so I want to keep the ship tight here. Dan, are you with me? And Kyle, I'll see you later.
I am. Hello, everyone. All right.
Thanks, Dan.
How do I share my video? I guess that's my only question.
There should be like a vid.
Well, we might go without. So great to see everybody. Are the slides up? My name, let's see.
Yeah, there's like a toggle switch that you can. Okay, here we go.
Great.
You got it.
My name is Dan Bolinson. I'm with Baker Tilly. We're an accounting and consulting firm across the U.S. I've been working with Tableau since about 2015 and with Python for about that same amount of time. So I'm pretty excited to be here and to talk about how we are starting to combine those two tools. I think that we've gotten a ton of value out of Tableau. We primarily use it for our consulting engagements, and it's really the best solution we've found for communicating insights with data, which is what we do. And so as we've started to work with clients, increasingly we were coming into the place where they wanted to do more. They wanted to integrate Tableau into decision-making processes, which opened up the can of worms of like, well, how do we write back to different data sources? What if the like read-only view that's inherent to visualization doesn't really cut it for some of our use cases? And that's where the extension API really shines, and what is the solution that Tableau really offers for that. And so, from Tableau's perspective, the extensions API lets you do more without leaving Tableau. Build Tableau extensions that can interact and communicate with Tableau and embed them directly in your workbook. So really what this means is we're talking about web services that you embed inside that Tableau workbook and that have sort of two-way communication with that workbook. So some of what you saw from Zach and Kyle on the embedding API with respect to being able to set filters or to read marks, that's all sort of part and parcel to the extensions API as well. I guess the way to think about it is embedding is about inputting Tableau inside of a web page or inside of a portal, and the extensions API is fitting a web service inside of Tableau. And so with this, we think that Tableau dashboards can really be extended so that they are data products that really help people take action. I think we all pride ourselves on creating visualizations that drive insight and that let people see their businesses or see their, whatever it is they're working on in a whole new way. And with extensions, we can take that next step so that people can begin taking action without having to leave that dashboard. There is an extensions gallery, which if you haven't seen, you should check it out. There is a whole wealth of extensions that are out there and that you can basically drop right into your workbooks. They can, whether it's customizing how filters are applied or different ways of engaging with parameters, there's just a whole host of stuff out there. And so I think the question is like, why would I build my own? And I think for us, ultimately, as we were working with our clients, the use cases were always unique. Everyone's business is different and everyone needs a solution that's specific to their circumstance. And the off-the-shelf extensions, might partly fill that use case, but we found that we needed to do, say, one more thing, and we found that being able to build our own extensions was a requirement for a lot of this to see real value. And frankly, a lot of the time we needed to be able to host it. And so most extensions will give you that option, but to the degree that we are embedding web services, a lot of folks are pretty constrained in terms of making sure that it's their own infrastructure and within their own four walls. And so that was certainly the position that we found ourselves in. Why Tableau extensions in Python? I think I'll answer this question with a little bit of a story in terms of how we got started. So I first got exposed to Tableau extensions when I attended a Tableau conference back in 2019. So a little while ago now, but as I said, we had been using Tableau for a while, and we're really excited to try to figure out how to do more. And so when we were at Tableau Conference 2019, this Tableau extensions framework was being shared with the community, and we thought, like, that's it. This is going to be the way that we can really take our Tableau dashboards and do more. So we got our hands dirty, we rolled up our sleeves and started to dive in and struck out. I spent probably more time than I care to admit at that conference, just in front of my laptop trying to figure out how to make it work. And Frankly, my background is as a data scientist, as a data engineer, more so than as a web developer. And as it came to, needing to spin up web services, to figuring out like how to present static pages in HTML that are then coupled with JavaScript, and that was just, frankly, a little beyond me. And so I couldn't make progress. I was pretty stumped. We went away. We went back to our offices and tried a few more times. And eventually we found there's another tool that we've worked with heavily over the last few years called Anvil. And we'll talk a lot about Anvil today, but Anvil is a pure Python web development framework. So what that means is it's a mechanism to build web pages or to build web services using just Python on both the front end and the back end. And so we tried to use that, and for the first time had some success. We were able to get started, and we were able to deploy an extension and get off the ground with these. So that was really, really exciting, but we pretty soon found ourselves beating the head. We always say around here that we have 4 head-shaped holes in our desks, and for us that was certainly the case as we tried to figure out the JavaScript API. There's a wealth of capabilities there, and frankly, we had a really hard time working with that. As an example of what we're talking about here, what we will often want to do is just get the selection that a user has made. So when somebody clicks on a mark, we want to know what was the information that they've selected. And to do that using the API, we have to go through a few different steps of first figuring out the worksheet that they've selected. We need to pull the marks out from that. And that marks collection is a data structure that comes out of the API that provides a whole wealth of information and metadata about those marks. And so there's a lot of value there, but it was frankly more than we needed. And so one of the key steps that we took was to take this API and to wrap that with what we're calling the T-Rex jacket. And that's then a way to take that information that's being presented and made available through that JavaScript API and parse that down into really the key underlying information that we care about in native Python types. So in this case, we're often getting stuff as lists of dictionaries. And so that's really where we're at today. The T-Rex jacket is open source. It's out there. We hope it provides value to everybody here. And so we're now in a position where most of our Tableau dashboards, frankly, are starting to see extensions baked into them in one way or another. And that's really what we wanted to do today, was to share how we're doing that and to give an example and to build one live with you guys. So, specifically why Python? I mean, I think, frankly, for us, and I think this speaks to many folks who are using Tableau, we're coming at it from the realm of analytics and data, and Python's the dominant language there. And so for us, again, with our lived experience, was just that the web development side of things was too much of a curve for us and our team to get going, whereas we do have the background in Python to be effective in that domain. So great, Python, we'd probably all like to do that. How does that actually work? And so I'll give a little bit of an explanation of what that workflow is before we really dive in. But first, we'll just say Anvil provides a framework for app development in just Python. So again, that means that there's Python going on the server side, just like Flask provides a backend framework for Python. Anvil provides the front end, like the Python capabilities on the front end. So if you're familiar with Node.js, in that case, you've got JavaScript running in the browser, and Node.js provides a way to write server-side code in JavaScript. And Anvil sort of flips that on its head. So you've got Python on your server, and then also Python running in the browser to drive the interactivity. Then Anvil X takes care of the translation of the Tableau API into Python land. The T-Rex jacket makes that simpler to work with. And as and when we need to run trusted code, we'll do that on the Anvil server, which again can be hosted by you as a software, as a SaaS solution or on-prem, or it can be hosted by Anvil. So that's sort of the high-level architecture. And the next thing we'll want to do is just go through like what this actually looks like to build a Anvil application, to build a Tableau extension using Anvil. So I'll share my screen here. And I've pulled a great dashboard from the accelerators. This is we do a ton of work with manufacturing, so this really spoke to me. And this is basically an ABC analysis. So it's evaluating the inventory that you have on hand to determine, like, is this a high priority inventory and we should stock a ton of it? or is it a little bit lower priority and we can take, deprioritize that, maybe carry a little bit less of it. So with that, we see where our specific products fall on this classification. So we've got our A products, high volume and high volume, stable consumption products, and then we've got some other products. This is being driven by an analysis that looks at the total volume and the frequency of purchases. It's pretty common analysis in inventory management. And Tableau has produced this accelerator to help you do that right away. So this is ingesting sales data and basically providing the analysis of whether or not you need to, what kind of inventory management you might want to take on. And so one of the limitations here is that it's purely based on the data. And frankly, most of the time in these types of inventory classification scenarios, you get your exceptions. You get the sales or the customer who's super important. And even though they don't buy as much, you still want to treat it as an A item. Or maybe there's a high volume item that's being sunset. So even though it's high volume, you actually want to reduce the inventory levels. And so our objective here is to basically provide a way to override the classifications that are sort of being automatically assigned through Tableau. And we'll do that through an extension. So this is Anvil X, which again is the framework we're going to use to build this extension. And we're going to go ahead, we can start building, which will bring us to the Anvil editor. This is where you begin building your apps. There are a couple of templates. These are basically accelerators for Anvil X as well. There's a value override extension. This is basically what we're going to build today, but we'll start just with a blank app. Build a Tableau extension. So this is what the Anvil IDE looks like. On the left here, there's all of the different key tools that we're using as we go about and build this thing out. So first and foremost, we have our directory for what our application looks like. We've got our startup pane, which is just some like startup code, boilerplate code. And our homepage here is what people are going to see when they first load this extension. So again, extensions are web services. So this is what that web service is based on. This is the front end of that web page. I have my design pane, which is where I can basically use a drag and drop interface to craft what I want this thing to look like and how this UI is going to work. And then underlying that, we've got all of the code, which is running again in the browser, so in client side, as Python, that drives the interactivity. And we'll talk a lot more about this. But before we dive in too far, let's just go ahead and deploy this thing. So I have this test in Tableau button here. I can click that, and it's going to give me the ability to download a manifest file. So this is a T-Rex file. It's basically a file that tells the Tableau workbook I'm working in that, hey, this web service is trusted, and I can use this thing for the purposes of an extension, which it does expose data and such to that web service, so you better trust it. I will come in here, and I can drop that extension in just as I would any other Tableau component. So in this case, all of my different objects here, one of the options is an extension, and I'll drag this in. This workbook's a little bit wacky. Everything here is actually floating. So first I've got to access local extensions. Downloads. Here is that T-Rex file that I've just downloaded. I can open that. Say OK. And because everything else is floating, I'm also going to float my extension. So this is probably looking pretty familiar. This is exactly that UI that we just saw on the Anvil side, and we see that it's now in our workbook. There's a configure settings here. This is going to pop up a dialog that lets us kind of configure the extension. We're not going to use this today, but there's sort of a way to kind of configure the extension specific to your workbook, particularly if you're running the same extension across a few different workbooks and it needs to be customized for the fields that are used, stuff like that. In this case, we're going to go ahead and just start crafting this specific use case, which is, as we said, we want to have a way to override the values, the ABC or the XYZ assignment that's been made for this workbook. So let's start off first just by clearing this out. We'll give ourselves a blank slate to work with. I should actually also say this boilerplate extension that we have comes kind of pre-built with a bunch of event handlers that are registered, including, and this is kind of a key concept as and when we're building extensions. Someone is going to take action in a workbook, be it they're making a selection or they're filtering some data or they are changing a parameter, whatever those kinds of events are, and we want to respond to those. So in this case, let's say I click on Eldon Portable Mobile. If I come in here to my Tableau output, I'm going to see a bunch of stuff that gets printed to my console. And that's happening real time as I make changes or make selections here. And it's coming about because of this events handler on the selection changed. So the really simple way of thinking about this is we've got to register an event handler for a selection changed event. And it's just a Python function that's going to get called every time that occurs. So if we look at what specifically is taking place here, someone makes a selection, and it's just going to print out what that selection is. And so we see specifically that, hey, someone selected a mark that includes all of this data. So with that in mind, we can go ahead and start building the actual UI for what we want this thing to look like. In this case, we'll just give it a title, say, assignments. I might make that bold. And we want to maybe add a label for the specific product that was assigned. And I'm actually going to, this name here, in Anvil, everything is an object. In Python, everything is an object. And so as and when we are working with the different components, either on the Tableau side or in our Anvil UI, we're treating everything as Python objects. And to make them easier to register in code, we'll label this thing the product. And let's also add a couple other UI features. In this case, we want to give people the ability to reassign ABC, XYZ. And so we'll add a couple of dropdowns for them to be able to do that. Let's also leave the ability for people to take a note and explain like why they made the decision they made. And we'll give them a button to save it. So this is going to be the save button. Let's actually give that a little bit more styling. And we will rename text area. And we'll take our two dropdowns. We'll have one for ABC, and we'll give it, the key items ABC, and give it a placeholder that's blank. And we'll do the same for XYZ. So I'm going pretty quickly here, but really all I'm doing is just sort of the blocking and tackling for building a UI, such that when I now go back to my framework here, my dashboard here, and reload it, I'm going to see right away that that is now got the UI that we just crafted. If I click here, I see that I can reassign ABC, XYZ, and then I could leave a comment here if I wanted to. Now, this thing doesn't do anything yet. We've just crafted the UI, and we want to tie this into our workbook to create a way for people to, fundamentally write back. And so first off, we want to adjust our selection event so that when someone clicks on one of these items, it's populating the current status. So we'll do that by coming into our code and adding code to our selection change callback. We will first get the selected mark. We'll do that from this worksheet.getSelectedMarks from here. And we're just going to take the first mark. So if someone did select more than one, we'll just take the first one to keep this a little bit simpler. And then we can take the product from this, which we see from this click event. We see exactly what that mark looks like. We'll make that assignment here. And we'll do the same for the selection on those two dropdowns that we assigned. And here we have to go in and see that, OK, so the specific field that we actually want to work with is this ABC profile and XYZ profile. And we'll pull the XYZ too. So now I'll come and I'll reload this again. And we see that when we make a selection, we're now populating the UI with the information that's in that dashboard. So with just that little bit of code, we're now in a position where we've got a web service or web application in our dashboard that's pulling in that information to sort of pre-populate the default values that are being made and that are used for in this workbook. And that's pretty cool. So to talk through a little bit about what we just did, the key entry point here is this get dashboard call from the TRX API. And this is going to be the way that we really interact with all of the aspects of our Tableau workbook. So if I get the dashboard, this is going to return an object that basically is the representation of our Tableau workbook. And if I look at all the different things I can do with this, I can get the data sources, I can get the filters. If I need to get a specific data source by name, I can do that. Same with parameters and worksheets. I can start to make changes to parameters. Really, all of the key things that exist in my Tableau workbook are being exposed to me through this dashboard object as the properties that I can start interacting with. And so we see that's exactly what's occurring when I register that event handler. And so the next step we want to take is to provide a way for somebody to now make a change to that data. And so to do that, we need to basically create a way to persist data. And we'll do that through an Anvil service called their data tables service. There's a range of services that are exposed here that let you sort of do some of the common stuff that you would need to do when building out an extension. In this case, persisting data. And so this is a way we can basically start to define what that schema is for how we want to store that data. We'll save it in an overrides table. And what we're doing now is actually defining the schema of that table we'll use to capture the data. We'll capture the products. We'll capture the ABC override. We'll capture the XYZ override. We'll capture the comment that someone made. We might also want to capture the timestamp or something like that. We won't do that now. But another really common thing that we're going to want to do is know who was the user that made that override. And we can add the user's service for that. This is kind of part and parcel with building Anvil applications and Tableau extensions using AnvilX, is understanding who is who. And so, that whole authentication layer is provided that makes it really easier to manage who users are and how to restrict permissions. We won't do that now because it does add a layer there, but suffice to say, whatever your SSO provider is, or if you're using SAML or anything like that, that's going to be exposed through that user service too. So now we've got this schema defined and we want to start capturing the data that someone is logging. And to do that, we're going to add a server module. So in this case, I said earlier that we're running Python in the browser. Everything we've done so far is really occurring in the client browser. In this case, we want to run secure code on a server. So we'll add a server module, and we will capture an override. In this case, we want to take the product, the new ABC, assignments, and the comments. So if we now go, we see all of our different services that have been imported here. One of them is the app tables. And so if I look at that app tables service, I'm going to see my overrides table. And this is that schema we just defined. So this is a really convenient way of basically working with the data that you're persisting through this Anvil application. This is accessing that table, and we can now add rows, we can get rows, we can search rows based on specific criteria. In this case, we'll add that row for our product. We will take that ABC and our XYZ overrides. And if someone gave us a comment, we'll take that comment too. So this is basically now the server-side code. It's like, this is the way that we are going to persist data. And it's, under the hood, there's basically an API that's being set up so that you can now call this function. If we go back to our client-side code, we can go to our save button if I double click on this, I'm going to create a new event handler that's just, again, a Python function that's going to get called when someone clicks that button. And what we want to do is save the data that someone has configured here to that data table. So first, let's capture the data that's in our UI. So we'll capture our dropdown selected values. We will capture our comments. And we'll capture the product. And now we can take that server-side function we just defined and call it basically as we would call a Python function. Anvil.server.call. It's going to auto-complete with capture override. And we'll pass it those arguments that we just defined as to how that function works. And when we now go back to our UI here, we'll reload this. And if I click on this guy, for example, I now want to upgrade that to be an A field, or I'm going to upgrade this thing to be an A classification. I can commit that. And when I come back to my data tables, I see, sure enough, OK, great, I've captured that product, and I'm noting that I want it to be an A. So that's pretty powerful. I mean, we've taken a standard dashboard and we've layered in a way to capture data from that using this basic extension or using this basic UI. Now, of course, the next step is we want to tie that in to the workbook so that it's actually reflecting the changes. Now, we've defined this schema here. We've defined this data table. And so we can now treat this as a Tableau data source. So if I click on my AnvilX extension framework here, I can see I can get access from Tableau. I'll enable that. And it's going to give me all of the instructions I need for how to connect to this data source. If I come into Tableau, we will pop over here. And we're going to actually use a blend or a cross-database join to tie this in specifically to this data. And so we'll add that connection. It is a Postgres database under the hood. So we'll connect to the Postgres SQL. I've already got some of the information in here. But really, the key one is capturing this password. We'll capture that. I'll sign in here. I wonder if I have the wrong. I think I must have copied the wrong thing. Great. So I see my overrides table that we just defined. I click on this thing. And I'm going to drag that in and just join it in with a simple join. I will have to define the relationship here, just as I would anywhere else. And it's actually done that for me. It's figured out that the product ties to the product. If I update this data, we should see, sure enough, here's that product that we wanted to join in. And so we can now treat that data has been added to our data source. We can now treat that as we would anywhere else. And we see those two fields that we've just defined have been added to that data and now augment that data that we originally had. So I will just really quickly add that to this workbook. I'm going to create a calculated field for effective ABC. And we'll basically say, hey, if an override exists, we want to take that. Otherwise, just fall back on this calculated C field. So we'll use an if null for that. And we will actually now replace all references for the ABC profile with that newly defined field that we have. So we will, and the key one to look at is we want to see if this honorable one is going to shift up. So I'll click OK. And sure enough, that's now been bumped up into the high volume. So if we were to go through, we could now make any kind of assignments to any of these products that we wanted. And we would be able to, oh, you know what, I've replaced reference, that key no longer exists. But we can now go through and update all of the information that we need from this workbook. So that is that's what we wanted to share from a sort of how this works. I will just kind of, to put this a little bit into perspective, here is a workbook that we have live with a client. They are a healthcare client. And so they have they sell like medical devices and are very restricted in terms of what they are, or how their salespeople are allowed to interact with folks. And so they have transactions that get flagged as potentially in violation of the sort of key requirements that they have for their salespeople. Those that get pushed into a dashboard and someone goes in and either can basically, like, there might be instances where even though things were flagged, they were in fact fine. Maybe there was a data quality issue, or for whatever the reason might be, something that has been caught as an exception shouldn't be. And so we need to clear that exception. And so this is a very simple extension that does exactly that, using exactly the same mechanism that we just talked through. And we have then sort of on our main page here, a screen that gives a summary of all of the different interactions that have occurred with a specific employee, including the ability to sort of keep track of, hey, we had an interview with somebody, we emailed somebody. It's kind of the full end-to-end process for how they're working with their sales folks to make sure people are on side. And we have like the ability for folks to really drive the full capabilities of how that all works. So just to recap, what we did there is we deployed an extension. We built that extension using Python to be able to capture some information. We've tied that information into a data table that we've defined, and then connected that to Tableau so that we're really augmenting the information that's available through that Tableau. I think we'll probably skip some of these other use cases. I will just maybe point out one. I won't pull this up because I think we're running a touch short on time, but this is another use case where we have basically developed a machine learning model or data science model that helps our clients run scenarios for supply chain. And I think that if I think about the use cases that we've worked on most commonly with our clients, they fall broadly into the category of augmenting a business process, like the one that I talked about with the medical devices company, or creating a front end for a model, like for sales and operations planning, or for in the banking industry, we do some work on ALM and stuff. And that's where building a front end and giving people the ability to run scenarios can really be powerful, where simple parameters kind of fall short. There's just a whole host of use cases that are out there. And as I think about it, the key takeaways that I wanted to leave folks with, first off, if your users are thinking about Tableau dashboards, I hope they're thinking about, what is the full range of how Tableau can help them. Again, Tableau is a fantastic tool for the ability of driving insights. We think that you can really leverage this tool and others like embedding to do more and to take action. And so as you're working with your viewers and your users, encouraging them to think outside of the box can really unlock a lot of value. Probably the number one thing is around, when you're working with Tableau dashboard developers, I get, I certainly for myself felt for a long time like extensions were out of reach. And I think that we've hopefully demonstrated today that, the capabilities or the background that someone needs to get productive and to be able to develop really cool stuff here is absolutely within reach. Whether it's writing a little bit of Python, and it's just like the learning curve there is absolutely within reason for somebody to get going and to really do powerful stuff on this. And for all of us, team leaders and otherwise, like there's just countless use cases that can be unlocked with this framework. And thinking about those can really, provide a whole range of use cases. And as much as anything, can also, support teams in continuing their learning journey. I think, as people come fully up to speed and are fully conversant with Tableau, they're super users in Tableau, I think this really does provide a whole new way of a whole new rabbit hole to go down, and a whole new way to explore developing their own capabilities for how to do more with what they already know. So in terms of how to get started, I said there was a question about that. Just go to anvil.works/x. That's going to be the starting point. You can sign up for an account there and get started. It'll bring you to the UI that we just looked at. I know a lot of folks might be working in situations like enterprise where the online SaaS solution is not an option. And if you need to get an enterprise instance set up, that's we can definitely get that sorted out. Typically for on-prem installations, for the full Anvil IDE there, that's like an enterprise. But certainly if you need to get going on that, then go do so. I will also point everybody to the T-Rex documentation. Share my screen again here. So this is there's a link in this PowerPoint, and this is going to be a great place to get started. It'll give you a lot of background in terms of like what's going on under the hood. There's a ton of tutorials, including like a value override tutorial that will really walk through what we just walked through. So if you want to try that yourself, I definitely encourage you to do that. There's another building a chat extension, which is a way of giving people a way to have a conversation about marks in a workbook. There's just really good sort of starting point extensions to start to kind of cut your teeth. Then there's a full API reference here as you start to dive into that dashboard object, and you need to understand like, okay, great, what are the different events that I'm dealing with, and what kind of methods and attributes and properties are available through those events. That's all here in our API documentation. And there's some how-to guides as you're going into this. Like I showed really briefly earlier how to configure settings through dialogues, and there's some great sort of guides on how to do that. So as you're diving in, there's some resources through that T-Rex jacket to help get over the hump. I'm trying to be active on the DataDev Slack channel, so certainly I'm available there. We're also running user groups with Anvil that covers this, and please reach out. That's fundamentally we're here to help. I think as you're going down this journey, we'd be really excited to work with you to run some guided build sessions and basically let you guys get hands-on keyboard with what we just showed. So I think there's really no replacement for getting your hands dirty, and we really want to enable that. And as you're go further down the rabbit hole and need to make sure you're developing securely and things like that, we'd be delighted to help. So you can learn more about us at bakertilly.com, technologies AnvilX, and that'll be linked out in the PowerPoint. So that's kind of what I had to share today. I really appreciate everyone's time. Thank you, Catherine, Kevin, and whole team for running this session. It's been a lot of fun. Yeah, really appreciate the time. And if anyone's got any questions, I would be happy to answer them here. How are we doing on time, actually?
Thank you, Dan. This is great. We got a break after this, and we got 1 minute schedule, but we're a break after this. So someone's got a doozy for you here.
Oh yeah. Okay, great.
What happens when there's duplicate product code in the new Postgres table you made on Anvil?
Good observation. So I moved quickly. The call it correct solution will be through basically do an upsert. So I just added a row here. Really what I ought to have done was to do a app tables overrides.get product equals products. And then if row is none, which is so basically if that product doesn't exist in our data table, then we will have to go ahead and create it. And then instead of doing like a blanket insert, we would do row update. Very good question, whoever, that's a good catch. I was trying to cheat it a little bit to make things run a little smoothly, but what you see here is probably that would address the issue that you rightly identified.
Great catch. That was a great question.
Yeah, no kidding.
Hard question. There's been some tough questions in here, y'all.
That's what you get for presenting to devs.
Right? Developer event here. All right. Unless we have any more questions for Dan, we'll keep answering questions behind the scenes here. We're really trying to click through them all. I think we got 4 right now we're working on. So stay tuned on getting your question answered. We are working diligently behind the scenes. I think at this point we're moving on to a small break, which is great. I could stretch my legs. And I think the next slide goes to, hopefully, oh yeah, Dan saying thank you again. I do want to again say thank you for everyone being here, taking the time. This is a long day. There's a lot of great stuff in here, and for those of you that stuck with us through here since the beginning, some great stuff in the afternoon here. And we will take a short breather. I'm gonna go dark here for a few minutes, unless there's someone else on my team who wants to take up the cause here. But the 2023 Tableau Ambassador applications are open. You have until July 14th. You can nominate yourself. You can nominate other people. Nominate whoever. We would love to have you in the program. The more people, the better. Come chat, join the developer program. If you haven't done it already, come chat with us on Slack. Find us on email, developer@tableau.com. We're in a lot of different places to find us. So if you know someone about the ambassador or who could be a great ambassador, please nominate them. And for now, I think we're going to go off the air for a few minutes.